prairie wind cut sharp against the skin as the sun sank low over the western horizon, painting the sky in flames of orange and crimson. Dust rose in thin spirals from the dry earth, clinging to the faces of two small children who stood trembling on the open land, their clothes torn, their eyes heavy with fear, and their tiny hearts pounding in a world that had already been too cruel to them. The boy, older by just a few years, pressed his lips tightly together as he stared at the weathered boots of the men before him. He felt the weight of every moment that had brought them here, and then, with all the courage he could summon, he whispered words that no child should ever have to speak. "Spare my sister," his voice cracked, but his eyes held firm. "Take me instead." The silence that followed was so deep it seemed the entire earth was listening. The rancher, hardened by years of dust and storms, froze where he stood, for he had not expected such words from a child. And yet, in that single moment, something in his soul began to shift, something he hadn't felt in years, an ache, a remembrance, and a pull that would change everything. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of selfless love, please pause for a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner for more stories that remind us of the goodness still alive in this world. Your support helps keep these stories alive. The children's journey had begun long before this desperate plea. Their names were Samuel and Anna. Samuel was 9, his face already carrying shadows of responsibility far too heavy for his small shoulders, while Anna, only 6, clung to a ragged doll whose seams had begun to unravel as if mirroring their lives. They had lost more than most adults could bear. Their father, once a ranch hand himself, had died in a tragic accident while breaking a wild horse. Their mother, weakened by illness, had passed away in the cold of winter, leaving the two children alone in a world that showed them no mercy. Since then, they had wandered from place to place, seeking scraps of food, hiding from strangers who meant harm, and praying each night that someone, somewhere, might finally see them not as burdens but as children in need of love. It was on one such day of wandering that they stumbled onto the sprawling land of a man known only as the rancher. He was tall, with lines carved deep into his sunburned face, and a reputation for being as cold as the steel of the branding iron he carried. He had lost his own family years ago, and since then, he had built walls of silence around his heart. No one dared cross him, no one dared ask him for kindness. And yet, here stood Samuel and Anna, fragile, starving, and covered in dust, their eyes pleading silently for mercy. The rancher looked at them long and hard, his heart at war with his mind. He had seen children before, had even turned them away, believing he had nothing left to give. But there was something about Samuel's gaze, steady, brave, and filled with sacrifice, that pierced the iron shell around his soul. When Samuel whispered his plea, offering himself in place of his sister, the rancher felt a jolt, as though he were looking into a mirror of the man he once had been, before loss turned him to stone. Days passed, and the rancher did not send them away. At first, he offered them food in silence, watching as Anna clutched her doll tightly while Samuel waited until she was fed before taking even a bite. He noticed the way Samuel worked tirelessly, helping with small chores, despite his thin arms and weary frame. He noticed how Anna's laughter, though rare, carried a sweetness that softened even the roughest days. Slowly, without realizing it, the rancher began to feel something he had long forgotten, the stirrings of family. But the road to acceptance was not smooth. The rancher's men, hardened cowhands who followed him loyally, grumbled about the children. They whispered that they were strays, mouths to feed, trouble waiting to happen. One even said aloud that the rancher should never have taken them in. Samuel heard those words one evening while carrying buckets of water, and his heart ached with shame. He whispered to Anna as she fell asleep that night that if the rancher ever chose to send them away, he would not beg, but he would do everything in his power to keep her safe. That promise weighed on his little heart like iron. Yet, the rancher had been listening too. Late that night, he stood by the window of the children's small room and heard Samuel's whispers. It struck him harder than any storm. This boy, with nothing in the world, carried more courage and love than many grown men he had known. The rancher found himself unable to sleep, wrestling with questions he had buried long ago. Could he risk opening his heart again? Could he love these children as his own, when the memory of his lost family still haunted him? Or would he fail them as he had once failed the people he loved most? The true test came one evening when strangers rode onto the ranch, rough men with eyes that spoke of greed. They had heard of 2 wandering children and came with cruel intentions, hoping to take them and sell them off for labor. Samuel, small as he was, stepped forward before the rancher could even react. He spread his arms wide in front of Anna and shouted with trembling courage that if they had to take someone, they should take him. The words echoed across the silent ranch yard. "Spare my sister. Take me instead." Anna clung to his arm, crying, while the rancher stood frozen, watching this boy fight a battle no child should fight. Something broke open in the rancher's chest in that moment. With a voice that thundered across the plains, he ordered the men to leave. His hand gripped the handle of his rifle, his stance unyielding, and his eyes blazed with a fire that none dared challenge. The strangers, seeing his resolve, retreated quickly, leaving behind only the dust of their horses' hooves. When silence fell once more, the rancher turned to the children, his hands trembling not with fear, but with the weight of a decision that had already been made in his heart. He knelt before Samuel and Anna, his voice softer than it had been in years. He told them that he would not let them face this world alone again. He told them that from this day forward, they were his children, and no harm would ever touch them under his care. Tears rolled down Anna's cheeks as she buried her face against his coat, clutching her doll between them. Samuel, though he tried to hold them back, let his own tears fall freely, his small hands clutching the rancher's arms as though afraid this promise might vanish into the wind. But the rancher meant every word, and for the first time in years, he allowed his broken heart to love again. The seasons changed, and with them, so did life on the ranch. Samuel grew stronger, learning the ways of horses and cattle, side by side with the rancher. Anna's laughter filled the air, her innocence slowly restored as she played in the fields, her doll now mended with careful stitches from the rancher's own hands. The men who once doubted now watched in silence, some even smiling, as they saw the change in their leader. The rancher was no longer a man of stone, he was a father again, and in protecting these children, he had found his redemption. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the strength of sacrifice, the healing power of love, and the way kindness can transform even the coldest soul, please like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so that more people can experience stories that light a fire of hope in dark times. Your engagement is what keeps these stories alive. And before we close, I'd love to ask you something special. Please comment below and share what this story made you feel. Did Samuel's courage or the rancher's change of heart move you in some way? Your words may inspire someone else who is reading. Because sometimes, it takes just one act of sacrifice, and one act of kindness, to change everything.